Our next speaker is Commander James Patry. He is the military director for our human systems.
Hello, everybody. So unlike all the other competencies you hear from with Mark and Jerry and Pete, I'm the military director, so you're not really getting the smart technical guy, unfortunately. But I didn't want to miss a chance to come to Boston and get some lobster rolls and some clam chowder, although as a native New Yorker, I die a little bit inside having to say that out loud. So the Human Systems Department at NAVAIR, we sort of talk about covering everything the human touches and everything that touches the human. We've got about 900 people at about 40 different sites that work on about 400 different product areas and about 4,000 different product configurations. And we really like the SBIR program. In fact, one of my past jobs, I was the SBIR program manager for PMA 285, the training systems group. And that's sort of the view in some of the program offices, that it's a collateral duty. So I had a real job, and then I also had to manage the SBIR program. And that was about 10 years ago that I went to one of the Navy Opportunity Forums and got to see Mr. McNamara's stuff presented. And we came back and we said, we need to do that. In fact, when I inherited, we had 16 contracts, and within about 18 months, after talking to some of your folks, we had 100 different contracts. And in fact, some great successes out of that. And those successes happen really, I mean, the government people in the room are all on board. We love the SBIR program, and we believe it adds value to the fleet. Some of you are here maybe for the first time and trying to figure out if it matters. It absolutely matters. And it's a dynamic, and I think you've heard some of that, that it's not simply a matter of we sit up in our ivory tower, we write a topic, you guys respond, although I would say from my experiences working SBIRs, it works a lot better when you talk to the TPOCs in advance. The cold ones that come in sometimes are just a little bit off because you didn't have that conversation and you missed some of the subtle points that might have made it even a little better. So, you know, onus on you guys to try and have those conversations, but also proactively. So I appreciate you guys being here because you're in advance of getting to submit to these topics and ask a lot of questions. You're here asking those kinds of things and thinking those things through. And as was mentioned previously, I think Jerry mentioned it, you know, when we can have those discussions before a topic comes out. You know, my folks are managing 400 different product areas. I only got 900 people. So there are tons of technical areas that we're this deep on at best, and we're really looking for industry and small businesses in particular to come to us and say, hey, I got this idea. I'm working on this new thing. You guys are the experts on that. Find us. I'll tell you, my folks, we have 2 main conferences we attend. That's one of the best ways to find people when their guard is down and they're not hiding all their business cards from everyone. ITSEC, the Inter-Service Industry Training Simulation Education Conference down in Orlando every year. First week of December, great time to be in Orlando. It's a great conference. I think the CNO was there this year and 30-something flag officers. You want to see what's going on in the training world, training and simulation, that's the place to go. You'll find our folks there and the program office folks, and you'll get a chance to really see what our problem space is. The other one is the SAFE Symposium, which is no longer an acronym, but it used to stand for survivability equipment, basically. And that covers the main areas that my folks work on. We really have 3 areas we work on. One is personal protective equipment, so anything that they're wearing that keeps them alive or they're touching. So it could be a life survival vest, it could be an ejection seat. We do those kinds of things. We also do human-machine interface stuff, so controls and displays for manned and unmanned systems. We're involved. In fact, there's some great stuff going on there. We don't have too many topics addressing that, but the Navy's sort of changing the way they re-architect that, and for our purposes, like I think Jerry just said, you know, we're not avionics people either. You know, I got physiologists and psychologists and mechanical engineers, so we are not the software experts. So what they've done is they've broken out in both the manned and unmanned side a presentation layer. They do all the guts of it, and then they put this little layer up there and like, oh, we can do that. We can handle that little piece of software, because then we have a little more control over what those things look like and the things that they touch. So some real good stuff going on there, and we're really looking for industry to help us understand how to capitalize on that. So a role for you guys. And then the training domain, which is pretty huge. And so in particular, there are some things that are happening now that you're going to see in our topics. One is that our flights have grown significantly. So where we used to have shorter duration missions with refueling and all sorts of technical improvements and mission changes, some of our folks are staying in the air for 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. And equipment that we designed to last for 90 minutes are now being asked to last maybe 9 hours. And that's causing us some problems. And then on the training side, training is changing so fast, software is changing so fast, we cannot stay on top of how to integrate all these things into what we're doing and understand what the impact are. So jumping into the topics, and the first one is the oxygen mask. So we've had some physiology events in our aircraft which have made the news, and many of you have probably heard of. One of the contributory factors is that aircrew do not always wear their mask when they're supposed to. And again, when it was a 90-minute mission, it was uncomfortable, but you had a lot more mask compliance. Now, if your mission is going to go 4 hours, you're wearing basically, a rubber plunger stuck on your face. This is really uncomfortable, and you get sore spots, and the moisture builds up. It gets really hot and sweaty. So guys and gals are always looking for a chance to pop off their mask and take a little break. Well, if your aircraft is flying at 20,000 foot and now you have oxygen that is free flowing over your face and mixing with the ambient air, you're doing all sorts of bad things to your system. You're actually depleting the oxygen concentration that's coming out, as well as depleting the oxygen in the air you're breathing, because now you're mixing in the ambient air with the airflow. So we have a whole bunch of things going on to address some of those, but we don't have an issue for the mask. And we don't even really have a good idea other than the things we see in movies. So we're looking for you guys to help us understand, how do we make an improved mask for the increased mission duration that has minimal impact on all the other things it touches? Because there's microphones and crash protective helmets and night vision goggles and a bunch of other things these folks are wearing. How do we get an improved way for folks to wear their masks so they get compliance, so they're getting a clean, healthy, fresh air stream while they're breathing, and minimize the chances that it reduces their effectiveness in their mission? Dry suit technology. Another issue where dry suits are not comfortable. If anyone's been scuba diving or wore any of those things, they're pretty cool for a little while, but they get pretty uncomfortable pretty quick. And this is sort of a comparable thing where we're basically saying, in case a plane crashes in the water and folks are out in the water, which is usually pretty cold, we want to make sure that they're protected from thermal stress and we keep them alive. The problem is those things are extremely uncomfortable, because remember, you're wearing your dry suit and you're wearing your flight suit and you're wearing your harness and your G suit and a gazillion things on top of it. And you are hot and you are sweaty and it is uncomfortable. And again, for an hour-and-a-half mission, okay, suck it up, Sally, and just do it. For an 8-hour mission, now you're actually really introducing all sorts of problems. Some of them being that you might actually be compromising the thermal protective properties of it, because there's a big layer of sweat inside this suit, which is now you're wet, which we don't want you wet, but now you're inherently wet. So we're trying to figure out, is there a way we can develop or really you guys can develop a capability that will let that fabric breathe, so that some of that moisture and some of that heat will get out when we need to get out, but when it's in the water, it's impervious to the water. So we're keeping the water out, yet we're also letting sort of the body heat and the body moisture escape, so we're not creating just a big Ziploc bag that you're living in. Another pleasant one, again, an hour-and-a-half flight, not such a big deal, although having used those systems, they're not that good. They're not really comfortable, but you suck it up. But again, as the missions grow, you can only hold it for so long. And so part of the physiological events, we're realizing that folks are sort of taking shortcuts now. So if you're going to have to go be in the air for 4 hours, you're actually thinking about, what am I eating and when am I eating and what am I drinking and when am I drinking? And they're intentionally really dehydrating themselves, so you don't have to go to the bathroom while you're in flight, because if you mess it up, call signs are born that way, and they're not pleasant ones. They're very colorful. So it seems really simple and it's really awkward, but most of us don't have that problem, right? There's rarely a bathroom that's not within a stone's throw of you, but all of a sudden, if you are 50 miles away from the closest bathroom and you really got to go, this is a significant issue. It seems like it should be easy. I mean, we do have stuff. We have, more or less adult diapers and relief tubes and piddle packs and none of them work that well, none of them are comfortable, and nobody wants to sit in it for 2 hours until your mission is over. So how do we come up with some new technologies that address this issue? Because even though it seems silly, and we laugh about it too, but the reality is people are doing things that are making them less effective at their mission and are compromising their safety. And that, that makes a seriousness to it that we're trying to wrap our head around and looking to you guys to figure out, is there a better way to do that? On the training side, hopefully most of you are familiar with some of the developments. Everyone knows virtual stuff now, but there's growing interest in the augmented reality, because one of the challenges in virtual reality is that it's really, really hard, expensive, and challenging to develop a virtual world. So some things work really well, some things not so well. We're pretty good at the visual environment now, not so good at touch. Touch is really hard to model, and so now you're trying to figure out, well, how do I develop an immersive trainer that enables me to take full advantage of what's actually present in the real world as well as a virtual world and merge those two. So now I can take cheap and easy stuff like touch and integrate that with a platform that has a whole virtual layout on it that might not really be there. So understanding, how to do that. We have technology going out in that direction, but more importantly, when do we do that? How do I know when it makes sense to do that? There are clearly some things that it doesn't matter for, but clearly other things where you go, And in fact, there are plenty of applications. The Marines in particular look at things like the urban warfare, where they rely a lot on touch. If I can't touch feel where the end of the wall is or where the person is in front of me or behind me, I'm not getting proper training. And so how do we now start understanding what training effectiveness do I get out of those technologies so that I figure out where to invest and when I choose to use a full-up virtual world, a mixed world, an augmented reality world, or I need to go put somebody in a real physical world and forget all the virtual stuff altogether. And understanding that trade-off so we can guide those decisions, because right now we're sort of at the nascence of that technology and we don't understand when we should do it and when we shouldn't do it, and it's not an inexpensive area, so any mistakes we make in saying, oh, we thought that was going to work, didn't work, has significant financial and readiness impacts. I'm sure we're all familiar with what's going on in the cyber world, so there's a whole new battlefield out there that none of us fully understand, and it's the cyber world. And somehow rolling a virtual grenade into the middle of a room could take out a whole carrier battle group, and we have a hard time wrapping our head around that. So as we start to develop these technologies and strategies to mitigate that, we don't know how to train people on it. So even though we've replaced bombs with viruses and worms and malware, and we kind of sort of understand what those are, the training we have for that is all very fake. So we have to take you off your real system, give you a fake system, and then introduce some kind of threat, and then have you try to react in this very safe training environment. And what they're looking to do is, how do I introduce those same kinds of threat on the operational system, which sounds really cool, because that would be great training, because I'm sitting at my real console doing my real job and I'm looking for viruses and doing, trying to fight off these cyber attacks. That's real good, except of course, who wants to intentionally introduce viruses into their operational network? So that's what they're asking for. And so the challenge here is, how do you come up with something like, my analogy, this is not the T-box analogy, it would be something like how you get your flu shot every season, right? You get a dead virus, they inject it in your body builds up the antibodies to it, and in this case, you get exposed to a dead virus, and your team goes and does their thing and neutralizes it just the way they should. But in the event something bad happens and they blow it, you don't shut down the whole network and the whole system. There's obviously a lot of classification issues in how we move out in this one as well, so I'll defer to the TPOC, but I would expect if you didn't have some of your TS tickets, it's going to be hard to participate in this one. But again, I'll defer that to them. A restraint system. So who's flown in a helicopter? Anyone? You ever wear that harness that you gotta walk around with? So some of them have those inertial rails that kind of keep reeling you in. Operators don't always like those, and we have some platforms that have adamantly said, we don't want that, because they have to place them in very inconvenient places, so they're usually hard lined into the system somewhere, and so you're always fixed to the same point in the aircraft, and you can't even necessarily switch sides of the aircraft readily. they're always pulling on you, so you're kind of fighting the system all the time, which, you know, when your airframe is moving in every possible dimension and you've got this thing yanking on you, it's very disconcerting, and it sort of compromises your ability to do your job because you can't move around so well. There's a whole host of other issues in terms of how well they don't work. Even simple things like we all have the seatbelt in the car. You know, you get your seatbelt in and then you're ready to, you know, get out and it's locked on you and you're doing and you can't unlock the damn thing. Well, that really sucks when you're doing a job in the back of an aircraft as part of a team and you're the one guy who can't move because you're locked in and you got to figure out how to unlock your inertial reel. However, we've had several serious incidents, some of them fatal, where the way that they do it now with the manual one, where you basically walk around the tether and you clip it in and you tie it in and you change, you know, you're always changing it, doesn't always work out. And so sometimes you're in a place where you're not tethered in correctly or you don't have the right slack on the line and you can literally fall out of the aircraft, and that has happened. So we're looking for ways to change that. So can we develop, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an inertial reel, but what kind of tethering capability can we give to the aircrew so that it minimizes the disruption to their job, enables them to move about relatively freely, but also has that security that they're not going to literally fall out of the back of the aircraft. So a challenge here, looking to the smart folks in industry to figure out, is there a way we can sort of crack that nut and keep our aircrews safe and let them do their job? One of our challenges in training is concurrency. The idea that how can I make sure that what I have now is exactly what the fleet has, and there's this gap between what I deliver to the fleet and when they have it. And so what we're looking for here is the idea of, is there a way that I can sort of put all this together and understand and pull from the literature, so basically a tool that will enable the folks in the acquisition side to say, hey, what happens if the training pipeline increases by a month? What's the impact of that? What happens if the pre-deployment cycle shrinks by 2 months, which is now good, right? Because if you go and you're flying for a living and then you go fly a desk and now you got to go back in the plane, there's sort of a skill decay and then that skill ramps back up. How do I know what the implications of that? How do I know if I decide to change the training from stuff they did in a classroom setting that might have been a slow, gradual increase to actually putting them in an aircraft or a high-fidelity flight simulator so that I increase the learning curve and now they're ready faster? We don't have any tools that help us guide us through that process, because those things are changing constantly. As our mission changes and our tactics change and our airframes change and we introduce new weapons and new sensors, the training world is changing constantly and we're always chasing it. We're always chasing it in that I don't know what just happened when I did this thing, when I changed this system, when I changed this training pipeline, when I introduced this training curriculum, and it gives us a poor understanding of projecting readiness. So tools that can pull and say, hey, guess what? If you reduce somebody's interdeployment training cycle from 12 months to 9 months, here's the relative gain in training, and here's where you're going to be instead of over here. And then it helps us plan for how we get folks out in the fleet as soon as possible. And lastly, somewhat relatedly, automatic speech recognition, some great work going on in the Boston area, has been for a long time, so a lot of the universities have spawned little businesses that are doing great work on that. The challenge is that, well, we all have plenty of stories of you're on the phone and you're talking to the operator and you're just screaming, operator, operator, because they're not understanding the questions you have. And the problem is usually those things they're usually pretty good. But they're typically pretty inflexible and brittle. So even things as simple as an accent change or noise in the background can throw it off. And in particular, if you're a company that owns that and you change something, well, the system is incredibly difficult to change. I can't just go and say, oh, we just want an option 5 on the automated voice thing, and option 5 is going to say, you know, it's the holiday department, this will put you through to the holiday department, whatever the thing is. You have to actually go back to whoever built it for you, tell them exactly what you need, and then wait for them to deliver that you. We're in the same boat in naval aviation. So while we have these constant changes in mission, changes in airframes, changes in sensors, changes in weapons, changes in tactics, all these things change, and then we inherit a system that is inherently inflexible. It only works the way that we had it delivered to us, and the only way we change it is that we have to go back and very clearly figure out what changed, and then go back to whoever built it for us and say, we want you to make these changes, and they come back and say, well, we'll have that to you in 18 months. Which is fine unless you're someone who's trying to train for that mission in the 18 months before that thing is ready, and now you're not prepared to use that system. So the goal is, can we come up with some kind of way of understanding the grammar and the syntax, the semantics of the automatic speech recognition, so that I can reuse that stuff a little faster and a little easier, and enable us to deliver the right training to the fleet, so that we're decreasing the gap in that concurrency. What is the status of what we do in the training world versus what is the status of what we do in fleet operations? We ideally want those to map. And that was my last one, but before Mr. McNamara goes out, I got to say thank you, sir, for teaching us that new trick. I will say one of the things we did that's related is when I was at 205 and we made those changes, it ended up, we had a bunch of small business working with us on what became the Portable Source Initiative, which basically enabled us to, in the same fashion that I think this automatic speech recognition is going, is to reuse the visual terrain databases. In the time since we implemented it, it saved the Navy $200 million. So, you know, SBIR program works. It works when you do it right. You have, again, a bunch of government people here who are committed to doing that. But some of it is on you guys, because you're an important part of that team. And I need you to understand how we think it should work, because most of the government people don't view it the same way. And you guys are going to have to figure out how to lead your SBIR points of contacts in the program offices around in the different areas to understand how you can help them develop these products, because it's a win-win. When we did that, we not only delivered a better product to the fleet for less money, 3 new companies hit the lottery on that one. So we ended up having 3 small businesses that made a fortune because they got in this area, which we were excited because it saved us a bunch of money. It also hurt a couple of other companies, big companies, who were not playing fairly with us. So I think it's a good example of how you guys can sort of shift things. And you win, and your company succeeds, and the Navy wins because we get good stuff for less money. Thank you, sir.